Hello everyone, I'm Georgia and this is The Sound of Georgia. Today I'm going to be talking about some of my Julie Andrews opinions that are probably not the most popular. So, I haven't mentioned it here on my channel yet, but I watch a lot of Booktube. If you don't know what Booktube is, it's basically exactly what it sounds like. Even in my year and a half of watching it, I don't know all the finite details, but the basic premise is it's a bunch of people on YouTube that talk about books. Booktube was also one of the reasons I actually decided to start doing this channel. I knew I wasn't gonna be a booktuber, but it was one of the things that made me go, I might give this a try, I might actually try to do this YouTube thing. But nevertheless, on Booktube there is this certain tag, and it's called the Unpopular Opinions Book Tag. And it's basically what it sounds like. You talk about your unpopular opinions on books. So I've decided I'm gonna do that, but with Julie. So instead of being my unpopular book opinions, it's going to be my unpopular opinions on Julie. Now, you all know how much I love her and that she can do no wrong in my book, but there are things about her career, mainly the movies, that I just don't really agree with, or at least agree with what I've heard or can imagine people think. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And I'm going to be using the questions in the Booktube Unpopular Opinions book tag. I've just tailored them to fit my purpose of Julie. There were a couple that didn't fit at all with this version because it's about books and this is, well, more about movies and Julie. But most of them worked and I've just tweaked them a bit. So, let's get into it. So the first question is a popular Julie movie that I didn't like but everybody else did. Go and watch last week's video on that if you want to see all the details. It's The Princess Diaries. Let's move on. So next we have a popular Julie movie that I liked but most people didn't. And I'm going to go with Darling Lily. I'm not going to lie, this movie really confused me the first time I watched it. Even now I'm still a little hazy on the most minute details, but nevertheless, I absolutely love this film. I mentioned it in one of my earlier videos, but it's basically a fictional Mata Hari story. Julie plays a German spy who moonlights as an English concert hall performer during World War I, and her new assignment is to get information out of Rock Hudson, which she does by seducing him. And that's all I'm gonna say, though I'm pretty sure you could guess where it would go. Now, to be fair, I don't know how unpopular Darling Lily is with the general population, but it was a flop and it didn't really help her career at all. And as I said, it confused me, so there's that. It was also a big part in the inspiration for SOB, but despite the fact that it isn't one of her most popular movies, I still love it. I know the reason I like it so much is because it was the first of Julie's movies that I saw after I met her. After that night I went, I need to see all of her movies, and this was the first one that I watched. Also, my first introduction to it was that night when I met Julie. They played the opening scene. So I think subconsciously I connect Darling Lily with meeting Julie, aka the best night of my life. But nevertheless, I absolutely love it. So the next question is an OTP that I hate. And as far as Julie goes, this one's easy. Eliza Doolittle and Freddie Hill. I do not ship them at all. Freddie is so boring. I mentioned this briefly a few weeks back in my Love Never Dies video, but I think Freddie might just be the most boring character in all of musical theatre history. He's certainly the most boring one I've come across. And I don't like the idea of him and Eliza together. To be fair, Higgins is my favourite character in My Fair Lady, but that's not the only reason I ship him and Eliza more than I ship her and Freddie boring dull. So you probably know My Fair Lady was based on Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw. And I mean really based. I read Pygmalion earlier this year. It's exactly the same. Lerner and Lowe threw in a couple of songs, added a few scenes, changed a few details around, and that's it. The dialogue is like 99% the same. But as far as Pygmalion goes, I believe Shaw actually confirmed that Eliza married Freddie. But Pygmalion's also called a romance in 5 acts. And really, I don't know how that's possible. At all. The The relationships between Eliza and Higgins and Eliza and Freddie are much the same as they are in My Fair Lady. As I said, it's very, very similar. But as far as I can see, there's no real romance at all between her and either of them. Even though Shaw confirmed that Eliza ends up with Freddie, it's still about as ambiguous as it is in My Fair Lady for both of them. For either Higgins or Freddie as to who she ends up with. Basically, I wonder how on earth Shaw confirmed that she ended up with Freddie, or more importantly, called it a romance, given what happened in the play. But whether you take Shaw's word and decide she ends up with Freddie, or you decide she ends up with Higgins or something completely different because of the ambiguity of the ending, Freddie and Eliza are a ship I will never ship. I will ship Eliza and Higgins so much more. If I could ask Julie one question, it would probably be, what does she think happens at the end of My Fair Lady? After playing the role for 5.5 years, what does she think happens when the curtain falls? Who does she think Eliza ends up with? The problem is, if I had the opportunity to ask her that, I wouldn't be able to speak. Past experience has taught me that. So the next question I have on the list is a character that I hate. I guess I have two for these ones. The first would probably be Abner Hale from Hawaii. I also mentioned last week that Hawaii is not my type of movie at all. As someone who is really not religious at all, Hawaii seems like it would be the worst movie for me. And yes, it is not my type of movie at all, but as I said last week, it's a very well-made film. But as far as our lovely protagonist of Abner Hale goes, I hate him. And I know it's religious and that would obviously have a very big impact on it, and I will admit I have not watched the movie in several years. But I just can't deal with Abner. As I said, I completely understand why he would be like that and why that works for the story, but that doesn't mean I like him. But as far as I can tell, and from what I remember, as I said, I haven't watched it in a few years, he seems to put converting the natives to Christianity above everything. And yes, as I said, I guess that's what would happen, but everything. He had to marry Julie's character, Jerusha, to get over to Hawaii because they wouldn't let him go if he wasn't married. But that's basically all she's there for, as far as I can see. So yes, I feel he puts converting all the natives above everything. There's a line in the movie where Julie says, quote,
Abner, do you believe every word in the Bible literally?
Unquote. The only time I ever really felt for Abner was at the very, very end of the film. At the beginning of the movie, when they first arrive on Hawaii, they save a baby who has been left out to sea to drown because he has this birthmark on his cheek. And at the very end of the film, a young man comes up to Abner, and it's clearly the baby because he's got a giant birthmark on his cheek. And Abner rushes into the hut to tell Jerusha about this, only to realise Jerusha is dead. She has been dead for several years. The other character I don't really like is Julie's character from Duet for One, Stephanie Anderson. And I think this is partly the reason why I think it's her best performance. Because I very much don't like the character. So if Julie can play a character and make me hate her, that's some pretty powerful acting. In Duet for One, Julie plays Stephanie Anderson, who's a world-famous violinist who has multiple sclerosis. And I'm not going to try and pretend I know what it would be like to live with multiple sclerosis. I have no idea. But I still find Stephanie as a character very unlikable a lot of the time. I think part of the reason I don't like her all that much is because of what I heard about the film and what the film actually was. One of the things that makes Stephanie really upset in the film is that her husband starts having an affair with the secretary. And that's what every description I've read says about it. In the film, all I can tell is that she walks in, or rather wheels in because she's in a wheelchair, and the secretary's there and her husband's patting his arm. So yes, it's clear that there's something going on, but given what we see on film, it almost seems like an overreaction from Stephanie. Again, I have no idea what it would be like to live with multiple sclerosis and the depression and everything she has in this film, but she's pretty unlikable for most of the time in my book. But that's why I love her performance so much. The next question on the Booktube Unpopular Opinions tag is a trope you are tired of seeing, and this probably seems like it wouldn't fit with unpopular opinions about Julie. And that's true in a way, especially considering Julie's film career is all but finished. She might do a couple of more voice roles, and she said she's on board if there's a Princess Diaries 3. God help me. But I doubt she'll do anything more. She's very much more focused on her humanitarian issues and her writing and directing revivals of musicals she's been in and playing with puppets on a Netflix show. But getting back to the question of tropes and how I worked that for this particular video, I'm going to go with a common theme that I've seen running through a lot of her movies, specifically several of the ones she made with her husband Blake Edwards. Over the span of about 16 years or so, she made 7 movies with Blake. The first one was Darling Lily in 1970, and the last one was That's Life in 1986. And out of those 7 movies, there were 4 that were very, very similar in a lot of ways. One of those being That's Life. When you watch these movies back to back, which yes I have done, I did a Julie movie marathon for her 80th birthday in 2015, where I watched every live action film she'd ever made in the span of a week. Because these 4 films were made so close together, if you're going in chronological order, they do end up being back to back. And yes, if you watch them like that, they are more different than it would seem when you're just talking about them, but they all contain several of the same things. The male protagonist is always going through some sort of mental breakdown, whether it's a midlife crisis or, as described in That's Life, a male menopause or something else. It's always set around the beach in, I imagine, LA. There's always girls much younger than the male protagonist wearing little to no clothing. There's always some sort of family cameo. I think 10 doesn't actually have that one, but that's the only one that doesn't. And most importantly, as far as Julie goes, she's always playing herself. The Man Who Loved Women would be the slight exception to that. She's not playing herself as much as she is in the others. But considering a psychologist was a big part of how Julie and Blake met, there's definitely some drawing on real life events for that, because she played the psychologist in that one. But every other time, it's basically herself, with the names changed. And yes, they are different in a lot of ways, but they're also similar in a lot, and that's what you think of first, all the similarities. Also, half the time the male protagonist is dead by the end of the movie. There was also a question in the Booktube tag about a book you have no interest in reading, but although it doesn't seem like a question I should include here, because this is about Julie and not about books, I am including it because although I will read, see, listen to anything she's involved in, I haven't got around to doing that all yet. I still haven't really listened to her Christmas albums, and I haven't picked up any of her children's books. But I'm sure I will someday. And the final question, as taken from the Booktube tag, is what adaptation is better than the book? Obviously, in regards to Julie, she is always the adaptation because it's the movies. But I still just wanted to talk about it. Being as big a fan of Julie as I am, the movie will always be better than the book for me because it has Julie. I mentioned that in the musicals I wanted to see video where I talked about Victor Victoria. As I said in that video, it's very, very unlikely that Victor Victoria will ever come back. If it does, it will be under Julie's direction. Even if it does come back under Julie's direction or not, and I'm able to see it, I will like the filmed stage production more because Julie's in it. But that doesn't mean there aren't other versions of the stories of Julie's films. Hawaii was based off a book, as was Tamara Seed and the Americanization of Emily, and of course Sound of Music was based on a memoir. That memoir made me cry. But it is hard to compare to the film in a way like this because it is so different in a lot of ways. It's very similar in a lot of ways, but it's very different. They changed a lot. And given that it is a memoir, I don't think it's fair to ask which one I preferred. Or maybe that's just because I am in way over my head in my love for Sound of Music and everything connected to it. Which version do I like? It all blows into one. I don't even know whether I like the movie better than the book. But with some of the films, mainly the ones she made in the 60s, there were novelizations of them. Torn Curtain, Thoroughly Mon Millie, and Darling Lily all got novelizations. I heard Star got one as well, but I can't find it. I've read the Torn Curtain one. I haven't read Millie or Darling Lily yet, but I really want to. And as far as the Torn Curtain one goes, it felt like I was reading the movie, so I liked it just about as much as I liked the movie. And I imagine it would be the same for the other two. So as far as novelizations go, they're almost the adaptation where the film is the source material. And as far as novelizations go, I imagine I would like them just as much as I like the movie. But other than the novelizations, I haven't actually read books of the movies she's been in. I want to read Mary Poppins, but other than that, any of the fiction books that were made into movies Julie starred in, I haven't read and really have no desire to. So that probably doesn't relate to the original question very much, if at all, but I just wanted to point it out. The adaptation will always be the best for me because Julie's in it. And that's everything for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments if you have any unpopular opinions regarding Julie's career, or anyone, really. Do you have any unpopular opinions about anybody or anything? Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my video next week. So long, farewell!